Good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce the silver underwriter presentation of Compass Data Centers. Their speaker, Chris Crosby, many of you do not need an introduction to him, but I'll hazard a few characterizations. Chris currently serves as CEO of Compass Data Centers as part of a distinguished and longstanding career in the modular data center market. And many of you also know him as a vocal proponent of industry change and progression. Over the time I've known him, I've always found his comments to be challenging, provocative, even incendiary, but always compelling. And I might add, my congratulations on his recent award twice over of Tier 3 certification of constructed facility of his first 2 deployments of the truly modular data center. So with that, please welcome Chris Crosby.
Thanks, Julian. All right, incendiary comments, here we come. There's fire protection in the other room, so we'll see how that goes. But thanks everybody for joining me today. Interesting topic we chose today, waste not, want not. When we talk about green and efficiency and things like that in the data center, it's always been a little bit comical. Well, it's comical across the board because there's so much hypocrisy in what we talk about whenever we get the topic of green. And we're going to talk a little bit about, at least our view, my view on what do we really talk, what areas are we talking about? You can't be green in one area and not green in another area. You either are or you're not. And that's the purpose of today, is just talk about the inefficiency on the design side. Very, very quickly, who we are, Compass, we do standalone facilities. We're a pure play wholesale player. We put the data centers where our clients want them, let them control it the way that they want to control it, and have an ability to grow those in a modular fashion where the building itself becomes the module. There we go. There was my product pitch. All right, so let's talk about big myths. So I've got 3 of them up there. I've got the Loch Ness Monster. I got that abominable snowman from the Rudolph deal that my kids still watch. And then I got the great Al Gore, who invented the internet, among other things, but just made, I think, $200 million selling his current TV to an oil company. So we have myths throughout efficiency, all right? There's a big myth out there in our business that scale is needed to drive out cost. The fact of the matter is, if you talk to people and they'll talk, oh, how do I want to get down to, Matt put up on the chart earlier, I want to get down to 5 million a megawatt or whatever the numbers are. How do I get there? Well, if I build out 100 meg at a time, I can get to 5 million a megawatt. Or if I build out 50 megs, or these types of concepts. And so the issue with talking about scale is that we're still talking about iron and pipe and copper and these big elements. We talk about labor. And so scale is an interesting thing that's been around for our industry, where people think that they get their cost efficiencies, whether it's per square foot or per kilowatt, up at these large numbers. How is it possible that you can be efficient and massive, at the same time? I kind of have a hard time with that concept. The truth is, and we've proven this over and over in industry, is that a product mentality is what's needed. And it's only through a product mentality that we can drive out costs. Now, of course, big issue with product mentality is it's fantastic if you pick the iPad as your product, and it really sucks if you pick the Newton, because your business can go away. So you got to be careful about the product mentality. It's actually a much, much riskier proposition from a business perspective, but it is the way how you drive out things. And there are examples after examples of that. One great one, Boeing 737, most profitable, most sold airplane ever, and still going strong. A product-based mentality focused around continuous improvement. And yeah, they made decisions. There's 2 engines, there's not 4. There's, it's this size, it's not that. It can do this, it can't do that. But through that product mentality, it was able to develop. Of course, if any of you that read our blogs and things know, the Honda Accord's a great example. I mean, there's plenty of examples, a Dell PC. You have to get to a product mentality to get to drive out cost. The man behind the curtain. So one of the great things about our business is that we talk a lot about efficiency, about things like mechanical plants and electrical systems, and then we just like pass this big, curtain in front of stuff like how we're using our capital, how we're using our materials like concrete and steel, how we use land, how we use our natural resources, and we call it green. So great. Look at this. I've got a 1.2 PUE. I clear cut 40,000 acres of forest. Put I built a building that's took as much materials as the Taj Mahal, but it's really green. And that's what our business does. And I mean, it's comical. It really is. I mean, when we talk about it, are you talking about it holistically? And this greenwashing goes across all of the different industries, not just our industry. But people focus on one aspect of it and then forget, like, oh my God, there's a huge elephant behind me that I've just completely ignored. And so how much does your data center use natural resources? How much land does it use? How much materials does it use? How much capital? And one of the coolest things about our business is that we are actually one of the few industries where there's this keen alignment between trying to get more efficient, being good for our business. So capital, if I lower my capital, that's generally going to be a more efficient type of scenario. That generally is going to be a more efficient solution. If I lower my operating expenses, if I can get to total cost of ownership, and we're in alignment. So a lot of folks, when they talk about, if I'm going to green the light bulb in my house, right, I'm going to pay more money for a CFL, I'm going to get a hazmat crew to come in when it breaks, and the lighting basically sucks comparatively to the incandescent bulb. All right, so why are we doing it? We're doing it to feel better about ourselves, at the end of the day. And that's the primary reason why we have those CFLs, in my opinion. When you look at the data center space, though, when we do things, it actually aligns. It's not just to make a bunch of politicians in a room feel better. It's to make, it means less capital, it means less operating expense, it means less resources. But as an industry, we haven't been talking about the building, the land, the resource. We haven't been talking about any of that stuff. We talk about what the next, chillerless plant is on a, 400-acre plot of land. Oops. There was Al Gore again. He was getting a reprise there. So what are these structures? We have these big-ass structures, I think is the technical term for them. We spend $20 to $100 million for 4 walls and a roof. And all we get is a dirt floor. Okay? It's got a ton of steel and concrete. All right? And underground and all of this future stuff that goes in that makes my friends like Tony in the front row here very happy on the front end of a job. But it's also the #1 killer of projects. Why don't enterprise projects get approved? Why don't third-party service providers go into new markets? Because your opening salvo is $20, $50, $100 million, and you don't even have a single kilowatt of data center space. Not one. You got a shell. And that makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. Now, when you're Facebook or Google or Microsoft or whoever, and you go out and you deploy 10 meg, and 2 weeks after that 10 meg turned up, it's operating at 8 meg or 9 meg, that makes sense. But when you're going to do it over 10 years and some future capacity plan that's 10 years from now, I mean, everybody knows that capacity planning can't last more than 3 weeks, much less 10 years. All right? Yeah, we talk about DCIM and where that's going to take us, but there's no way to predict it. Who's going to predict what M&A is going to do next? Who's going to predict the next app? Who's going to predict the next piece? So how can you possibly deal with that? If you were truly modular, you wouldn't go in a 1 million square foot building. Because it's a 1 million square foot building. How's that green? And it's, I mean, from an accounting perspective, this is just common sense. The worst thing that your real estate department, your CFO's office, they hate it. It's a depreciating asset. There's nothing worse than stuff that's sitting there that's just ticking away for a bunch of years. Dead assets on the books. For the enterprises in the room, if you've got data centers that are sitting out there, how many of you are still paying depreciation charges that prevent you from doing a better consolidation, prevent you from doing a consolidation? You've got great plans, you got ways to save money, you got all this stuff, but guess what? You got an income statement hit every single day because of that depreciating assets that are sitting out there. That's the reality. So land, monolithic facility. We call it monolithic when we did our what type of data center are you? I got a lot of feedback, oh, monolithic, that's really bad. Well, last time I checked, like big ass building is a monolith. I mean, these things are huge. I think I read an article today that there was one that they did over in Wales, and the local Welsh people call it the white elephant. That's what they call the building, because it's this huge white building. And that's basically what we've been doing as an industry. Well, how is that efficient from a land perspective? How is that green from a land perspective? What can you use that land for? What happens if that great idea that you had that was going to deploy out over 10 years turns into a big shell building? Still 10 years from now, right? It's got a data center and 20,000 feet, and there's 200,000 feet of an ice rink. Well, guess what? My previous company, we made a living out of buying those facilities for pennies on the dollar, and then redoing some things inside of them. I challenge you to take something that if you don't have a couple-year viewpoint on being full on, how this is a more green, a more efficient model. So how do we get green? Well, let's see. Let me clear cut a few hundred acres, and I'll add a solar farm. Can anyone explain to me how this is environmentally friendly? I just don't get it. This makes absolutely no sense to me. When you look at what goes on in these types of environments, and we're greener by putting on-site generation and taking out a forest as a result of it, I just have a hard time with it. Let's look at materials. Standard designs are what allow you to eliminate material waste, right? So if you're Dell, when Michael Dell was in the garage in Austin, hook 'em horns, and basically focused on taking this PC and doing the same thing over and over again. And they had some few options on things, but the way that they got rid of stuff was they got rid of waste, right? And then they make mods to the motherboard, mods to this cable size, mods to that cable size. And you do it over time, and you can eliminate waste. Standards in our industry are just really a starting point. They're either the discussion point that kills all conversation, where you talk to a third, well, sorry, that's not in our standard, so we can't do that. Of course, the standard was, like it's some biblical, it's the book of Job or something like that. The second thing is that we don't check the standards. So when you have certifications in our business, and it's encouraging to see more and more LEED certifications or more, uptime certifications. I was shocked. Julian mentioned it earlier. We have 10% of the constructed Tier 3 facilities in the U.S., Compass data centers. We have 2. That's kind of scary. Now, there's 131 design ones. That begs a different question of why didn't you get a constructed facility? Maybe you value engineered out some stuff, but that's a different issue. But how do you get to a standard design? How can you get to something that you can eliminate materials, eliminate components? When you build a building, I'm not a big fan of the tons of CO2, but it does crack me up when somebody talks about all the CO2 that they save when they built a 500,000 square foot building. When you look at concrete, when you look at steel, when you look at what's production there, what is it that you've done? If you take out 100 acres of forest space to put in a solar plant and make Greenpeace happy, how much of a carbon sink did you take out by taking out those trees? It's just the holistic argument. We just don't have a lot of it in our business, and we need more of it. So what are the resource inefficiencies? These numbers are from James Hamilton over at Amazon, but just on an average home, 95,000 gallons of water a year. So we get into a lot of guys and they talk about water use and how do we get more water? Well, 5,000 foot megawatt data center, 17 million gallons of water using an evaporative system. 15 meg, 131 million gallons of water. Now, water in some places is abundant. Water in some places is recycled water. There are scenarios that are there, but the one thing I know with operating a lot of square footage of data center space over the years is water-based systems were a maintenance nightmare, right? We had chemical water treatments. You got stuff that's corroding away. It's just always sitting there, and it's always working against you. So exclude the costs of chemical treatments or whatever goes on there, but that's a lot of water. So when we say that something is more efficient than something else, it's one of the reasons why the green grid had to come up with WUE, right? Water usage efficiency, because people were just, hey, if all I have to focus on is PUE, well then, let me just use all this water, like that's a free resource. Now, Seattle, maybe it is a free resource, but I got to tell you, in the great state of Texas, it's not. And we have a lot of different water issues. One of my favorite anecdotes is T. Boone Pickens and his big wind farm push to do gigantic wind farms in Oklahoma was predominantly not about wind farms and green energy. It was about getting utility rights from as either Edwards or Ogallala Aquifer into Texas, because North Texas is one of the greatest growing regions in the country. So had nothing to do with water, it had to do with follow the money, like most things green. So one of the concepts that I'm a firm believer in is that the problem's generally solved. It's always interesting because, and I think it was Andy alluded to it earlier, that things that come from outside the industry usually help you in your industry. So on the data center side, we're predominantly mechanical and electrical folks. So I don't know if anybody knows this, but Hedy Lamarr, the actress, she was the one that came up with a concept of spread spectrum communications. Now, God knows why I know that. I have a lot of issues, but the point is that the concepts came from outside the realm. And in the case of ASHRAE and its expansions on ranges came much more from an IT-centric side of things and an IT hardware side of things than it did from the mechanical and electrical plant. Because we've always grown up knowing, hey, look, my temperature and humidity needs to be this tight, and precision cooling, right? We don't hear that term very often anymore, but that was our term for however long it was. We had to have precision cooling. Well, every solution doesn't have to come from within. Lots of times it's disruptive when it comes from outside. And you look at that ASHRAE expansion range, all of a sudden, it's a totally different set of criteria that you can deal with. And here's the US-based model of the green grid chart, but I really didn't know that Houston, Texas could have 3,800 hours of outside air, partial and full outside air. Houston, Texas is like, it's horrible. I mean, you sweat in places you don't even know you have. And here we are, and that's 8,700 hours. Dang, that's pretty close to 50% of the year. Who'd have thunk it? Now, can I get more efficient with water? It depends upon what your definition of efficiency is. Airside economization is a great example of taking something with a very simple approach and really testing all the hypotheses. This chart on the right is from RomoNet, which is a DCIM software that we use on the Compass product that integrates in, and it does some total cost analysis, total cost of ownership. So let's go back to 2011, fall of 2011, and I'm arguing with, not arguing, well, yes, I am arguing because it's me, but talking with my mechanical guys, and we're going over what's the best, I've run too many data centers. I don't want to have all these different types. I kind of want what Southwest Airlines did with the 737 and that one set of spares. I want to move it from here to here. And so I challenged the hypothesis that you have to use different cooling in different climates. And it took us about 3 months to go through this, and RomoNet was able to do this in about 3 days, which was pretty cool. But basically go back, get all the climate data, know what it is. And so we took, in this case on the right, New Mexico, which is a theoretical climate that would be really great to add, say, an evaporative cooling, spray cool on top of it. What's the payback? Obviously, it depends upon cost of water, depends upon cost of electricity, depends upon cost of the capital that goes out and the operating expense. But the funny thing is about people in this space is they'll say that this is more efficient than that, and they won't include economics. And I challenge the whole room that if you don't include economics, you're wasting a lot. Do the math. If you do the math, you'll come to some surprising, let's just say counterintuitive conclusions. In this case, we've got once again, and there's a white paper on this on our website, but you're in a scenario in which you have a negative payback by adding adiabatic. And you go, well, wait a second, we add adiabatic, we never turn on DX, ever. That's better. No, not necessarily. Not when you consider capital, not when you consider operating expense, not when you consider the environment and how things go in that particular climate. So what I found as we developed Compass's product was all this noise about I need to use water-cooled here and air-cooled there, and I use this there and that there. Boy, the deltas versus costs doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And the point is when the whole reason why this fits in this presentation is what's more efficient? And I would say you got to do the math, because once again, our industry is the only one that the only one that I'm aware of that aligns so cleanly with being green and it being green as in dollars, and that they're in good alignment. So what are the things that we don't talk about that we need to? It's materials, it's land, it's capital. Okay? If you're not talking total cost of ownership, if you're not talking about how you're using your land, how you're building your buildings as part of your solution, you're giving it a half-assed solution, because it's not reality. You can't have a green facility that's 1 million square feet of vacant space. It's not possible. So how are you using things? There's a word for this stuff. It's called stewardship. How are you stewarding the resources that you have? It's not just about what's more efficient. It's being a steward of the resources. IT and the growth of IT continues to be the engine for the economy, and it's going to continue. How can we make best use of those resources? We happen to believe that the standardization is a way to get there. We make power outlets. I hate to burst everybody's bubble, but that's really what we do at the end of the day. That power outlet can last for a period of time, and it can run so much compute, so much storage, and so much network until you do the next refresh, and then it does a logarithmically increased compute, power, and storage till the next refresh, and then it does it again, then it does it again, and then maybe at that point you're end of life. Maybe. 3, 4, 5, 6 refreshes. So you got a power outlet for that period of time. Make it efficient. Build what you need. Think about it holistically. Because if you don't think about it holistically, you're greenwashing. And there's a lot of it that goes out there, and I'll bring back the myths. But greenwashing, and that guy on the far left up there, Al Gore, he makes a lot of money off of greenwashing. So follow the money. And if you follow the money, you'll figure out what's actually more efficient. If you're not willing to do that, and you get caught up, running with whatever's, this technology is better than that technology, you will make the wrong decisions in this business. That's a given. When there is a better way, we should use it. Industry has shown us over and over and over again that there are better ways to do things. Our concepts in our business don't have to come from within. Things, I'll never forget the first time that we saw hot aisle containment or cold aisle containment. And I had a company come in several years ago and talk about this great new technology that they developed. I had been in a fab in 1980. They've had curtains in the fabs forever separating air. We don't have to come up with the ideas. We just have to be humble enough to go outside of our own space, learn those other areas, and then apply them. And if you really want to be green, you talk about efficiency of resources. When you don't have to come up with the idea and you can use somebody else's, that's the most efficient way you can ever get. So that's all I've got for everybody today. hopefully give you a couple of things to think about, and if nothing else, challenge the baseline assumptions. Because we talk a lot of smack in our industry. You know, we get, when Jim Glanz with the New York Times writes an article that challenges us on whether or not, you know, data centers are bad or good, we don't have a lot of great responses. You know why? Because there's a lot of big ass facilities out there that aren't efficient at all. And when the outside can see that and we can't, we're doing ourselves a disservice. That's it. Yeah.